The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering Co-op Advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, an ancestor of one of the largest slaveholding families in the country, based here in New England, faces that legacy. Tom DeWolf will be in conversation with the director of the Healing Racism Institute, Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery, at the UMass Amherst Center in Springfield this evening at 6:30. They'll preview that conversation with us later in the show.
We'll also hear about a much less nefarious legacy when we hear about the resurgence of the farm stand at the center of Wilbraham, when we talk with Anthony Meloni from Rice Farm Stand and Clara Moreno from CISA, the local hero folks.
But let's start with you. While we were off last week, we asked if you could elect any fictitious character to the highest office in the land, because at times it feels like we live in some imaginary fictitious land anyway.
That's a whole can of other worms.
Yes. We asked you who it would be and what their campaign slogan would be.
And you had some great, wonderful, beautiful, insane ideas.
Hi, this is Peter Malin in Williamstown. And for president, the obvious choice is Pogo Possum. Pogo is from the comic strip Pogo by Walt Kelly, and Pogo in fact ran for president back in the late 1970s. And his motto was, I go Pogo. So he is the obvious choice. He's also a brilliant possum. Bye.
Walt Kelly also made an album based on Pogo. This is from that. The other thing I love about Pogo is that during the War of 1812, the U.S. Navy defeated the British Navy in the Battle of Lake Erie, and the Master Commander Oliver Perry wrote to Major General William Henry Harrison saying, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." Pogo's famous twist on that is, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." And that seems very true all too often in so many different ways.
Yes, so somebody who can rightfully identify the problems of the nation might be good for that, I think,
yes.
In that case.
I'm going to go with Bill the Cat from Bloom County if we're going to go with comic strips, though. I think he also ran for president. And I do believe at one point had Donald Trump's brain implanted in his head in the 80s, as if Berkeley Breathed was prescient for some reason.
I do not remember this at all. At all.
Opus is another good one, too.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, how about another clip?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Kenneth Mulder, and I live in Granby, and I'm calling regarding my ideal presidential candidate. I'm a Quaker, and I really struggle with how conflictual our politics are. I would like candidates who try to be friends with the other side. So my ideal candidate would be Barney, and Barney's slogan would be, "Let's be friends like friends should be." Thank you.
I mean, I'm assuming he means that Barney,
Yeah,
right?
I
It was
was
hard
thinking
out
that
of
he
context.
means-
Could be another Barney, but
I mean, there's a lot of Barneys, but I think the other ones all have last names.
Yeah.
So if we're just talking like Barney, just Barney, it's got to be this one.
the purple dinosaur.
The purple
Because he was so
dinosaur.
focused on friends. I like that. I don't know how effectual Barney would be as a president.
Well, only because he doesn't have as many opposable thumbs and things.
That's right.
Yes.
Linda Matson chose Martin Sheen's character, Jed Bartlett of The West Wing. He's a very popular choice all the time when it comes to the best presidents that have been depicted on screen.
He was already president. So
Yeah, so he was already
he's got
president.
some experience
We know
doing
what
it.
he would be like, at least in his oratory. Here is one of my favorite clips of his off-the-cuff oratory where he's talking to a radio host.
I like your show. I like how you call homosexuality an abomination.
I don't say homosexuality is an abomination, Mr. President. The Bible does.
Yes, it does. Leviticus,
18:22.
chapter and verse. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions while I had you here. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery, as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. She's a Georgetown sophomore, speaks fluent Italian, always cleared the table when it was her turn. What would a good price for her be? While thinking about that, can I ask another? My chief of staff, Leo McGarry, insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly says he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or is it okay to call the police? Here's one that's really important, because we've got a lot of sports fans in this town. Touching the skin of a dead pig makes one unclean, Leviticus 11:7. If they promise to wear gloves, can the Washington Redskins still play football? Can Notre Dame? Can West Point? Does the whole town really have to be together to stone my brother John for planting different crops side by side? Can I burn my mother in a small family gathering for wearing garments made from two different threads? Think about those questions, would you? One last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the ignorant tight-ass club, in this building when the president stands, nobody sits.
That is Linda Matson's choice. Martin Sheen's character, Jed Bartlett of The West Wing. I get the chills every time. I want to memorize that.
Really?
Yeah, kind of.
Actually, it's not that bad. It wouldn't be that bad a monologue. That's a fun one.
I'm terrible at memorizing.
Yeah? Oh, come on.
Yeah. And I never finished The West Wing, I must admit. I've got to get back to it. I got like 4 or 5 seasons into
it came on while we were in college, so we had a lot of extra time to like sit and watch and binge things. And maybe when we left, we stopped having quite as much free time to do said things.
I never watched it in college, but I did watch it doing a lot of laundry in the early part of this decade.
Oh, yeah. No. West Wing watch parties in the Women's Center, no less, at Kenyon.
Interesting. Well, Mike from Holyoke said, I'm voting for Walter Mitty from James Thurber's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. The slogan would be Dream Big. He says, it's insane that we are in a neck-and-neck race between decency and the devil. These are Mike from Holyoke's words. He chooses to dream big. Here's a clip of Danny Kaye's version of Walter Mitty in the first version of the film.
Samuel Goldwyn presents the James Thurber story that delighted millions. Starring Danny Kaye, 8 times as funny in 8 hilarious roles. One as Walter Mitty, the dauntless sea rover. Anatole Mitty, the Mad Hatter. Captain Mitty, ace of aces. Dr. Mitty, the brilliant surgeon. Mitty the Kid, Western desperado. Gaylord Mitty, the riverboat gambler. And in real life, Walter Mitty, the lovable henpecked dreamer.
He's definitely well qualified. I mean, he's got a lot of skills, according to that one. And there's also the movie, there's another Walter Mitty movie that starred Ben Stiller.
I feel like I should also say about The West Wing. I forgot. Allison Janney's in it. She's a Kenyon alum. That's why we watched it.
Oh, yeah. That's her best role. Tom Sturm.
From East Hampton.
Yeah, musician. He's Snackbeard the Pirate, among other things. He wrote a sea chanty about me one time.
I know. That's the best. That's the best compliment.
He used to have a column called President for a Week, a cartoonist, a political absurdist humor comic strip that ran in 2002 under a pseudonym, Tao Jones. The strip was based on the premise of showing what any number of well-known celebrities, cultural personalities, or familiar fictional characters could do if they were elected president of the United States. And some of those include Ellen DeGeneres,
Arnold Schwarzenegger,
who, I mean, if he were born in this country, he could very well have been.
Well, he got to governor. That's not so bad.
Yeah, Gene Simmons from Kiss, which is a questionable one, I think.
The Incredible Hulk.
And Captain James T. Kirk, which might have been the best of those. There was a very long and well-thought-out email that we got from one Andrew Baker, who says, Frog for president. I'd like to nominate the fictional character Frog for president. That is, Frog of the fabulous Frog and Toad children's book series by Arnold Lobel.
I love it. Frog presents as a relatively gender-neutral leader and will appeal to voters across the gender spectrum, allowing all of us to identify. As an amphibian American, Frog brings lived experience on both land and water to address our climate change challenge. And as a proud green-skinned candidate, Frog offers a counterpoint to our human-centric identity politics, adding some much-needed chlorophyll and expanding our inclusion model to underrepresented plants, trees, and lizards.
Most important are Frog's leadership skills and qualities. Frog leads by action. An example, not pandering and overblown rhetoric. Frog is soft-spoken and does not carry a big stick. Frog is a good listener who's attentive, patient, kind, and compassionate. And when others are able and willing to accept advice, Frog is a good problem solver who offers achievable step-by-step solutions.
Often carries a bicycle and a basket.
Yeah.
By contrast, Frog's friend Toad might be seen as an exemplar of the American electorate, manifesting the side of our human nature that screams out work in progress. Toad is cranky and impatient, an impulsive decision-maker motivated by fear, greed, and the desire for instant success. Toad is self-absorbed, easily frustrated, and struggles often with an inability to see the big picture.
One sometimes wonders why Frog hangs in there with Toad. Fortunately for us voters, Frog asks not, what's in it for me, but rather, what can I do for my friend? Toad. Frog is a steadfast companion with a good sense of humor and adventure, just like the leader you want with you through good times and bad on the bumpy road of life.
Many of life's important questions are addressed in the adventures of Frog and Toad. We could all benefit from more leaders like Frog and from cultivating these leadership qualities in ourselves.
Frog's campaign slogan is deliberately designed not to fit on a bumper sticker, but rather to gently expand our minuscule phone-frazzled attention spans. Frog says, let's sit down and have a nice cup of tea and talk this through together. All of this wonderfully written at the suggestion of Andrew Baker, who he says is writing from the fictional town of Shelburne Falls. They are filming another movie right there, right now. So it's fictional there half the time.
I mean, if it wasn't so idyllic, they wouldn't keep coming.
I guess you're right.
Okay. This last one is definitely out to get our goat.
Yeah.
For sure.
Hey, this is Dan from Amherst, and my fictional candidate that's fictional with a PH is Wilson, King of Prussia, and the slogan is "Make Gamehenge Great Again."
So we've done a lot of disparaging of jam bands on this show, and maybe this is our comeuppance. Gamehenge is a fictional setting for a number of songs by the rock band Fish. That's Fish with a PH. And it can be traced back to the man who stepped into Yesterday, which is a senior project of Fish guitarist and vocalist Trey Anastasio. Who are we to step on your fictitious love of these characters? No. So thank you for sending that along.
Yes. And
if you've still got a good idea, the election is 2 weeks from now. We'd love to hear it. Who's your fictitious president of choice? You can send it our way, thefab413@nepm.org.
Indeed. Later in the show, an ancestor of one of the largest slaving families in the nation who was based here in New England faces that legacy. We'll talk with the author Tom DeWolf, who will be in conversation with the director of the Healing Racism Institute's Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery at the UMass Amherst Center in Springfield this evening at 6:30. They'll both join us later this hour.
It's Tom DeWolf, too, and it's fine. Don't worry. We get a lot of names right and wrong here. Up next, a local hero spotlight on the agricultural and social hub of Wilbraham, Rice's Fruit Farm.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Greenfield Savings Bank, providing residential lending advice for homeowners looking to refinance or start home improvements. GSB's residential lenders are here to help navigate all lending options. Find more information at greenfieldsavings.com or at 413-775-8200. Greenfield Savings Bank, member FDIC, DIF, equal housing lender, NMLS 409187.
It's rustling in here. That says a lot.
Yeah. Hi. What do you want? Want me to say my name?
Not yet. It's time for a local hero spotlight, and we are at Rice Fruit Farm on Main Street in Wilbraham. This place is jumping, and you can now say your name.
Yeah, hi, I'm Anthony Meloni from Rice Fruit Farm and the Apple Place, actually.
Yeah, we went to the Apple Place last year, and you just this year have taken that Apple Place over after working with them for a while to make that transition. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, they both the old owners came as part of the package of having to work for me for at least a year, and they've been fabulous and showing me the ropes over there of what they do. And we really haven't changed anything over there other than the 1 day a week that they're closed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where we are right now is the restaurant store. They've got breakfast sandwiches and coffee that we're drinking right now. And then you've got this awesome neon sign that says the Apple Sales Room, a peachy place to be.
Sure.
And there's tons of people here right now. We were like, Claire Morneau from CISA, the local hero folks, you were surprised.
Yeah, so busy. This is a real center of activity here.
Yeah, we thought there might be an event going on, but no, is it always like this?
Oh yeah, this isn't even the morning rush. But it's so funny that you should mention the sign. So the Peachy Place to Be sign was actually, when we bought Rice's, it had been closed for 6 years, and it took me 2.5 years to get it reopened. We had to bring it up to code and remodel it, and struggle to keep it the same kind of feel, but also make it viable. I got to get people here. What do they want? So we added the ice cream area, etc. So that was an original Peachy Place sign to be. And then you mentioned an Apple Sales Room neon sign. That actually came from a property right up the road called Green Acres.
I thought Green Acres was the place to be.
Green Acres is the place to be.
Farm living is the life for me.
Yeah, Green Acres, we hope, will be the place to be eventually once we, same thing. I said, I don't ever want to do this again, which was to take a rundown building and farm and bring it back to life. So, but that is kind of the plan that we plan to do up at Green Acres as well. So
let's move to a little quieter spot where we can
answer my question.
Yeah, where we can chat.
Yeah, we'll go up to ice cream.
This place is huge too. It's got all these fun little sprawling hallways, and then we're walking past the ice cream stand here and all sorts of other cool old hand-painted signs. And what a love tester that looks like the Zoltar machine from Big.
Death Star!
You've got a Death Star on the door.
That's no moon.
I saw an Uncle Fester over here.
Yeah, the Addams Family shock machine.
Oh, Fester, how much do you love me?
We had our funhouse mirror and our 1920s love tester. We don't have like a ton of rules. We don't want to be graded like, you can't do that, you can't do this. Like she said, we saw a Death Star on the door, and yeah, we have a dark side ice cream.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
Make all our ice cream right here. We're actually ready to take it the next
for the
level.
ice cream too.
Yeah, back when Mass Live did a poll of all the things, I think we were the #1 People's Choice Award winners, and then when the judges came out and tested them all, I think we came in 4th overall in the state.
We can blame Elizabeth Roman for that. I think she was part of. She's our colleague at NEPM. She was a professional ice cream taster.
Is there a working agricultural farm, or is buying Green Acres going to be a part of expanding into that?
Our footprint is on 23 acres, and only about 6 acres of it is usable. So we own 7 acres across the street for the church behind us that is a little bit of overflow parking, and potentially will be some agriculture. But yeah, so we've actually been working for over 4 years on rehabbing Green Acres. There's no actual stand itself set up over there, so we're able to bring the pumpkins that we grew over here to sell. And this year we had peaches, and we had a small apple crop as well.
We're at Rice Fruit Farm with the owner, Anthony Meloni, and Claire Morneau from CISA, the local hero folks.
Rice Fruit Farm is sort of the main retail outlet, and then the Apple Place is more family fun and baked goods and that sort of thing.
Corn maze, right?
Corn maze. How do you think about what each of these businesses has to offer to Wilbraham?
I actually think they're very complementary. If you look at Rice's, we go year round and we're closed 3 days a year, Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Over there, they have an off season. They close after Thanksgiving. And here, you're able to come inside, sit down. Over there, it's very seasonal, and it's very weather driven. But yeah, we were some overflow. Some of the fancy apples that we grow over there, we're able to bring over here.
Oh yeah, what are we eating right now? This is said is your favorite.
Yeah, this is probably my new favorite apple. It's called a Jonah Prince, and it's a great fresh eating apple. A lot of the apples we grow over there, we have some heritage varieties and we have some newer varieties like Jonah Prince, not super new, but we have Evercrisp apples and Ludacrisp apples.
Roll out, roll out.
I've been trying to take surreptitious bites.
That's the piano that's here, where a young person is playing it, and that's awesome. You played very beautifully.
I've been worried about my apple crunching, but there's a
Yeah,
lot
don't worry about
happening
it.
here.
No, it's fine.
It brings reality to the radio.
I was going to say it's all terroir. It's fine.
Well, I'm curious about your background. How did you get into this?
We are my family and my little brother currently actually runs Cindy's Drive-In in Granby, Massachusetts.
Cool.
Yeah, if you've ever been there before, it's the polar opposite of Rice Fruit Farm, in that it's a 50s style, 50s music playing in the background. Very small shop, but very popular, and they do ice cream, hot dogs and hamburgers, etc. And they enjoy some popularity there. I was telling my brother who lives in Wilbraham, I was like, hey, Wilbraham doesn't really have an ice cream spot. Find me an ice cream spot. So this came on the market. We talked with the old owners and said, as long as the town says we can do ice cream, we'll do it. And we thought like, hey, we're going to do ice cream over here. And like, we'll do whatever we have to do over in the farm stand. But ice cream is super popular here. We do it year round, which a lot of places don't. But so that's how I ended up. I wanted an ice cream spot. And now I have this big old farm stand that's turned into almost 300 acres of land.
Yeah, you have a big old farm stand and 2 big farms. So you're like an agropreneur all of a sudden, if that's even a word.
Of course, it's been hard, adjusting into the agricultural end of it. But what are some of the surprises that have come up from taking over these 3 farms and getting into farming on the side?
Right. Well, there's no shortcuts when it comes to the farming. So whether it's bringing up the apples to get pressed for cider, this year we had amazing weather, right? You're always at the mercy of the weather when you're doing the farming. Last year, nobody had peaches. This year, we had a bumper crop of peaches, bumper crop of apples. So, we do sell some apples to the local schools, which is awesome. They're getting apples that we might have picked 2 days ago into the school system. So it's a win-win for everybody. As far as surprises, not too much surprises. I think everybody knows that you're going to work for your money when you're farming. My main thing is to try to make it more people-centric. Like, how can I get more people to the stand? What's fun about them? So, over at the Apple Place, we do a corn maze. It's a Harry Potter themed. So people are coming for the corn maze and they're grabbing a pumpkin. I think to be successful in farming around here, you're not going to do it commercially. It can be done, but for me, we're more worried about direct direct to consumer and getting the people there.
Yeah, I don't think people think of agriculture and Wilbraham hand in hand necessarily, but even just the drive on Main Street here, there's a bunch of small farm stands and some kind of big ones. I saw a farm stand with tons of pumpkins out in front on the way here. Yep. So is this something that was part of Wilbraham's history that is now becoming part of it again, or has this been going on all along?
Yeah, so there has been, quite a few farms, and my degree, you had mentioned, like, well, how did I get into this? Well, my degree is actually in economics. I'm an economics major from UMass.
So you are an agropreneur.
So with a background in economics, it's funny, when I was taking my first micro or macroeconomics class, when I was just a business major, they used apples as an example, which was kind of ironic of where I am now, and I still remember it, and I don't remember much from college, but they were using apples as the thing, as apples were a seasonal crop. They would try to store them in, the coolers locally, but basically the price of apples hadn't changed in 20 years, which led to a lot of farms being turned into developments, etc. It was a tough business model, right? You're trying to sell apples, and your costs are all increasing, real estate taxes, utilities, diesel, and the price of the apples has stayed the same. Mm-hmm. So I think that helped spur the creation of APRs, which Green Acre is an APR, which is agricultural preservation restrictions. So, it allowed a couple of the farms to stay viable, and ours is one of them.
When you were studying economics at UMass and they use the apple as an example, did they tell you not to compare it to oranges?
No, I don't think. At that point in time, I didn't know I was doing apples at all, but I did remember the whole comparison, which makes you see, hey, am I going to grow apples to sell in, supermarkets or wholesale? Absolutely not. The cost, to refrigerate it, I would lose my shirt. How do we get them? We're going to have to pick your own apples. We're going to sell directly in our stands, and even then it's going to be a struggle, right? We have bad weather. We got no peaches to sell you. People are like, why not? I'm like, well, if I can't control the weather.
That's what you think. Ask Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous.
Well, good. You were comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Yeah. And I think you're doing great.
Yeah, it's more like apples to the restaurant business, right? So we're a little bit of a hybrid of both. Yeah. Ice cream shop, coffee shop, cafe, breakfast sandwiches are super popular. One of the things I didn't count on when I opened this was that the amount of college students I would get. So I went to UMass, right? So we're the Antonio's Pizza for Springfield College in Western New England. Nice. When college is in session, if you come in on a Saturday, and the opposite, you're Antonio's getting your slice of pizza at night, but if you come in here on a Saturday, Sunday morning, we got hundreds upon hundreds of college kids rolling out of bed at the crack of 10 o'clock, coming in and getting their sandwich. It's like the place to see and be seen. And it's a lot of fun. And they're waiting a little longer than we like, and they're getting their breakfast sandwich, and everyone cheers because they finally got their sandwich.
There's a skeleton over there that has a sign on it that says, "I've been waiting for my breakfast sandwich."
It's more,
just gonna own it.
There's a little too much truth to that. It is really how it gets. So we're trying to figure out how to speed things up. But so actually, and this Sunday, believe it or not, we just broke our breakfast sandwich record that had been strong for 6 years. Kudos to my employees because it's not easy.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do without gutting your kitchen and redesigning it.
Yeah, we're in the process. So we've had growing pains for sure, but good problems. We're trying to breathe life back into the farming community, but if you notice here, we sell local that we don't produce. We get stuff from Dickinson Farm, we get stuff from Breezeland Orchards, we get some from Johnny Appleseeds in Connecticut, and we sell a lot. We sell a ton of local farm-related products, and we like it that way. It's very big in the community. We're immersed into it, I would say, and I tell this is the heart of Wilbraham. Everyone, I say they have a Rice's story, that it was their kid's first job, or it was their first job, or they used to come and get donuts with their grandparents after church, or whatever the case may be. So it feels good. This is more than just a source of income for us. It's almost mind-blowing, what the place means to people. You'd be surprised. I'm surprised.
Can you talk a little bit about what fall looks like here? I see that you have a Dracula's Delight ice cream.
Yeah.
Don't be scared. I'm the super sweet monster with the super sweet new cereal, Count Chocula.
Fall in New England in and of itself is special, right? So I really enjoy fall, and I would love to get out and do more stuff in the fall. Unfortunately, I'm usually working around the clock.
That's farmers' busy time. Yeah. No one's expecting them to be anywhere but finishing the crops.
Especially apple farmers.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we before we even opened up for business, like I said, it took me about 2.5 years to get this place revamped and redone. I'm pretty slow, but people would pop in from time to time to see how things were coming along and what to expect. But on a nice fall day, car after car would pull in hey, you guys open? You guys got some apples? You got some peaches? I was like, oh, we're going to be busy in the fall. And for sure, September, October, are definitely our busiest month, with November right around with pies.
So you do bakery stuff in addition to the counter there that has like sandwiches and coffee and pastries and.
Yeah, so like a lot of the other farm stands in the fall, we have our cider donuts, which are popular, and a bunch of other pastries. And I know we try to keep up. We usually sell out of cider donuts almost every day, especially on the weekends. But a lot of places have those. We have what a lot of places do not have, and which we're kind of noted for, is a muffin top. So
I have one of those when I put my pants on a certain way.
It's only in reference. I had that in Seinfeld.
I can't believe somebody pulled the top off this muffin.
That was me. I'm sorry. I don't like the stumps.
Once I had them, I was like, wow, these are really good. So they're like the best part of the muffin, and it's like twice the size of a regular muffin, and that's kind of our signature bakery item. When we have the native blueberries, those are going in the muffins. Like we have the native strawberries, we'll make a strawberry one. Same with the peaches. Right now we make a cinnamon apple muffin top, so we'll put the local apples in there.
Do you know a little bit about the history of Rice, like the previous owners, and like how long this farm stand existed before you got here?
He was, from what I understand, Jesse Rice is the one that did the transition from a straight up farm to the farm where, hey, come on in and you can get your baked goods or your coffee. Wilbraham itself is known as like that was where like the first peaches in Massachusetts came from. So peaches in particular, I mean, apples were, nationwide, but peaches were kind of the thing that we have the Wilbraham Peach Festival. Peaches is actually what put Wilbraham on the map, and Rice's was the driving force behind that.
You are a younger person with 3 farms now under your belt. But like there's an interesting story I feel like there too about like taking over these farms for older people who are aging out of it. Have you encountered anything with like the older generation that you're inheriting these farms from that are good lessons or might propel you to get like a 4th farm now?
No. Yeah. So as far as we had the Green Acres farm, and one of the neighbors came over, and he saw me mowing on the tractor, and I was getting clear, and it was like really a little overgrown. So he came over and he was like curious, I think, to what was going on, and then he's like saw me in the tractor, and he's like, Anthony, he's like, are you buying this? I'm like, oh, maybe. And he's like, that's awesome. I thought there would be a little bit more reservations, but I think what it is that these people have gotten to know me. We've been open for we've had this for 12 years now. I think people have like a rapport of trust. I'm like, well, I haven't even told you what I'm doing over here yet. And he was just like, this is awesome. Nope, I know it's going to be awesome. That's a good vote of confidence. I'm a little like, all right, that's a little bit of a pressure point, but part of it is too, feels good to bring something back to life, and the neighbors are super happy around the farms that we have.
Is this what you imagined for yourself, Anthony Meloni, from Rice Fruit Farm in Wilbraham when you were studying as an economist at UMass, that you'd envision you'd be on a skid steer or doing some major mowing in the middle of the day?
Well, my dad always did say that I belonged on a farm. As like I like to be outside.
What, do you live in a barn? Kept leaving the door open?
No, he knew.
He
knew. I always liked to be outside, and I liked land, and he was like, one day we're going to get a farm for you, and that just blossomed into so much more. That was never on my radar to start with, other than like I wanted to have an ice cream shop in Wilbraham.
Start with the dream of ice cream. The ice dream.
The stracciatella ice cream, that's like our Italian chocolate chip. We're sort of like shavings. And
not a lot of people do that.
No, that one we actually developed by accident, but we do make holler ice cream in-house, small batches in hand, same like the muffin top, small batches by hand. There's really no shortcuts. We use the best ingredients.
So what is the Dracula's Delight flavor?
I am Dracula.
So it's a cheesecake ice cream with raspberry swirl and white chocolate chips.
Ah,
cool.
Nice. That is cool.
Yeah, we switch it out with the seasons. So right now we're doing pumpkin and pumpkin patch, which is a pumpkin Oreo ice cream.
Thank God for not calling it pumpkin spice.
The grape nut caught my eye. That's like my dad. My dad always likes the most sort of like austere flavors, like grape nut, maple walnut.
Grape nut ice cream, and along with the Run Raisins, and definitely has its audience demographic. I won't go into.
Do you have any Werther's original ice cream?
I still remember getting my first candy from my grandfather.
Shut up! I like rum raisin.
Yeah, it's good.
I also massively appreciate that in your kitchen you have a giant sign that just says mise en place.
I saw that too. I loved it.
And it's like, oh, that just makes me so happy.
A little bit food nerdy.
You guys know what that is?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so I put that up. Most employees probably don't know what that. I do have a couple that went to culinary school, and they for sure know it. And the background is, so this is not just me, this is my brother as well. His degree was in food service management at Johnson & Wales. So he's a culinary background. He's the foodie of this place. So he's the one that actually develops ice cream recipes. And And like he's the one that helped design like the sandwiches and stuff like that. So we have a pretty good working relationship. We talk fast. And we speak each other's languages, so we bang boom it out. You don't usually see us both at the same place at the same time, but when we do, we can like hammer it out. So he's got the foodie background. But yeah, mise en place, for those who don't know, is a French culinary term. That means a place for everything and everything in its place. I just tell my workers that means keep your area neat and clean. Keep it organized. Yes, chef. So I'll say we have a rush, I'll like point to the sign, mise en place. Get your area cleaned up, nice and neat, make your life easier.
Yes, chef. Yes, chef.
Totally. It's awesome that you guys picked up on it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah, so really cool.
You're awaiting your Michelin star any day now. Thanks again to Anthony at Rice's Farm Stand and at Green Acres and at the Apple Place in Wilbraham, and Claire Morneau from CISA.
Where you can check out the corn maze at the Apple Place that they've got up, which is magic themed. Yes. Up next, a preview of this evening's conversation at the UMass Amherst Center in Springfield between Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery and author Tom DeWolf, which seeks to look at the nation's legacy of slavery with descendants of those at the Industry Center.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This evening at 6:30 at the Amherst Center in Springfield from UMass, a conversation with Tom DeWolf, author of Inheriting the Trade, New England's Hidden Enterprise. Tom is a descendant of the largest slave trading dynasty in U.S. history.
Tom will introduce the coming to the table approach to racial healing, truth-telling, justice, and transformation. This model provides leadership, resources, and a supportive environment for all of those who wish to acknowledge and heal wounds from the racism rooted in the U.S.'s history of slavery.
Tom will be in conversation with the director of the Healing Racism Institute, Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery, and we are joined by both. Thank you so much for coming onto the show in such short notice before your event.
Yes, luckily you're in walking distance of the event if need be. But let's start out with you, Dr. TLC Avery, as I want to call you now. What is the Healing Racism Institute, and tell us how it operates here locally?
So the Healing Racism Institute is an organization in which we seek to really educate the Springfield community and beyond. We provide 2-day seminars to individuals where we open the door up to help you learn how to have better conversations about race, to learn the history of racism, to provide you with tools to have conversations that are difficult. We also go in and we work with various organizations who might want to do additional work around healing racism and dismantling racism. So we've been around for quite a number of years. We've actually had a lot of individuals through Springfield to come through our program. So usually we start with a 2-day program to really immerse ourselves in this conversation, and then we go from there.
And tonight, you'll be in conversation with our other guest here, Tom DeWolf, who is part of the family that is the largest slave-owning dynasty in the U.S. There's a great documentary called Traces of the Trade, an Emmy-nominated PBS documentary, shameless plug for our WGBY television station here in this building, part of NEPM.
GBH.
Yeah, and produced through GBH. And rightly so, Greater Boston's public television station there that actually stands for Great Blue Hills, and we, the Great Blue Yonder, are part of this legacy of slavery in a way that is really easy to think that you don't need to think about. Oh, we live in the North. We live in the Northeast. This is where abolitionists were from. This is where, all of these great leaders of the abolitionist movement sort of made their way. But Bristol, Rhode Island is the main hub of the slave trade in the U.S. in many ways. Talk about coming to the discovery that your family was part of this story, Tom.
I grew up not knowing anything about this. It wasn't until I was in my 40s and a fireman came up into the restaurant that I owned the fire hall was right around the corner, and he said, I think we might be related. My dad's middle name is DeWolf.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, could be. And it turns out that we were. Dave and I were sixth cousins once removed. And his father told me about this long history of this family, all the famous people that were related to, Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, Drew Barrymore, her great-aunt Ethel was married to a DeWolf, and the Colt 45 inventor, his brother was married into the DeWolfs, and then he said, and then there were the slave traders and rum runners and privateers, and then he went on to something else, and it sounded to me like something out of Disneyland, the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And so it was years later when Dave said, hey, I just got invited by my cousin to make a movie about the family, and I owned a movie theater. He says, you like movies, you should call her. That was my introduction to this. And so everything was very kind of fluffy until I started learning and understanding that this family, 3 generations of this family from about 1769 until 1820 were 3 generations, the largest slave trading dynasty in U.S. history, more than 100 voyages. The next closest sort of group of people was like 30 voyages. And this is North and South America. It was the Caribbean, a lot in Cuba. And, these 10,000 folks, they figure there's probably 500,000 of their descendants that are living today. And so learning this history was, I grew up in Southern California. I had black friends, and I'm in junior high school, and I'm learning. You learn what you learn about Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the typical Martin Luther King, and But I'm in junior high when Dr. King was murdered, and the Kennedys, and so it's a fraught time. And then come to find out later, I may have been in school with people whose ancestors my people had enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy.
Mm-hmm.
That is author Tom DeWolf.
Give me a moment.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I feel like after watching the movie, and we're going to skip around a whole bunch, I have a feeling, but there's an interesting position that you have with the rest of your family. There's a moment where your family is having a conversation about this legacy that they've now been through this whole journey on, through Bristol to Ghana to Havana, and then you're seated around a table with each other trying to talk about what happens next. And one thing I was really struck by is that it looked like out of the members of your family, you were the only working class member of your family that was there. And that gives you an interesting perspective, too. How do you feel like that affected what you saw on this journey?
2 parts to this answer. One is I was initially rejected for this film.
Oh.
By your family?
By the filmmakers, because I'm not a direct descendant of the slave traders. I'm a direct descendant of the first slave trader's older brother.
Okay.
So I said, appreciate it, but no. And it was one of the producers, Juanita Brown, who is an African-American woman, who convinced the filmmakers, look, he's the only one that still has the last name DeWolf. He's interested. He represents the white people that we need to talk with, that we need to impact. And so going on that journey was a real eye-opener for me because I learned things I didn't know. Some of these other folks did know more of this history, but my dad didn't know. I mean, we came through Illinois, Iowa, California, and just had no connection to that history anymore, no knowledge of it, and so it was heavy. It was, transformative sounds cliche, but it sure changed my life.
That is author Tom DeWolf, who will be in conversation this evening at 6:30 at the UMass Amherst Center in Springfield with the Healing Racism Institute and its director, Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery. You're having conversations with people day in and day out with your institute about wrestling with racism. That is something that permeates the entirety of the culture. We swim in a soup of racism, no matter whether we were slave-owning families or not. Are conversations like the one that we're having with Tom right now acknowledging a legacy of being an actual beneficiary of the trade of slavery common in what you're doing with the Healing Racism Institute? Or is it more of a just day-to-day, as I mentioned, swimming in racism conversation that you're having?
Well, it's interesting because it's a day-to-day, but we often have to go back to look at history in order to help people understand. Because the first thing people will do is to sort of do what Tom did a few minutes ago. You know, I'm liberal. I'm living in California. That's not my family. I don't understand why we have to talk about race and racism all the time. So it's a matter of really teaching people about the history so that they can understand that whatever we do today is impacted by our past. And so a part of what we're doing is taking people through that journey so that they can see. Now, people don't usually have the privilege of just going off to Ghana like Tom did. And I just recently came back from Ghana. So we'll have a really interesting conversation tonight because we had a couple of different perspectives. But if people can understand that really the history of slavery in America impacts all of us, regardless of race. And if we can get to the point where we can see, like Tom is saying here, that history matters. We can't just skip over it. That's why there's the hurt and the pain and the heartache. When you say we don't need to talk about race, that hits me in a totally different way. Yeah. Even when Tom was describing his upbringing and you asked him about being in working class, I was thinking about my upbringing. Very different. So he may be from working class, but I actually grew up in Mississippi, about 45 minutes where Dr. King was killed, right, in the home state of Ida B. Wells. And I just think about what I've been through as a Black person. That's still very different from a working class white person. Mm-hmm. And until we can actually deal with those issues and talk about them, we continue to have these problems, and people continue to pit us against one another, right?
You know, and something you remind me of is one of the things that comes up to me in presentations that I've done over and over and over again is a lot of white folks have said, I'm sure glad I'm not you. I'm glad I don't have your family history. And I say, oh, really?
Like, have you looked?
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Because we don't know our history. And now we've got political people with power trying to bury that history. We don't want people feeling bad. And so we're going to hide this stuff. So, of course, I'm not going to know my history if I'm not going to research it. If I'm not going to pass the stories down to my children and my grandchildren. Because everyone was impacted then, and everyone, like you said, is impacted now, period. Yeah. Everybody was eating rice. Everybody's wearing cotton. Everybody's smoking tobacco. They're drinking coffee. They're putting sugar in their coffee. Tell me they weren't involved in the slave trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even today, if you're of immigrant stock or even recent immigrant stock who weren't here when the slave trade was legal, we still benefit from the legacy of slavery economically, and race plays a major role in that as well. You know, my family was Irish and Italian, and they weren't looked very well upon, but we sure looked white, and that did give us an advantage over even your Dr. TLC Avery's experience in Mississippi in so many ways.
Yep.
So learning how to wrestle with that, or address it, or internally address it, and be able to vocalize it, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of, like, everyone understanding that, like, living with that discomfort is not necessarily something that needs to be avoided. Because, like, you're talking about your experience, and, like, I have a very different experience having grown up in Boston as a Black person, and being bussed out to schools and, like, what that was like, and being, like, the one kid in the room.
Absolutely.
And especially the one excelling kid in the room. So, like, looking at it from, like, all of these different aspects and the things that we're told, especially up here, about where the trade was, like, how long it ran and how long it impacted where we were, like, the land that we were on. Like, there were, like, Nubian Square in Boston, like, used to be where they sold people. So, like, It's interesting to try that in these past years, like we're trying to reconcile the narratives from all angles and see where that discomfort leaves us.
Right. And to be able to understand that the intergenerational trauma around being a descendant of an enslaved person and a descendant of an enslaver, because we all have the trauma of slavery, right? And what I love about Tom, we've only known each other for a very short time, but we have authentic conversations where we're allowed to just express who we are. And we're uncomfortable probably some of the time. I mean, he's a chatty person. So and so am I, quite frankly. But I know that I can say what I need to say to him. Like when he knew I was on my way to Ghana, I said, I don't know how I'm going to feel about you when I come back. And that's a very real thing to say. And his response was, I'm here for it. And that was beautiful.
Well, I can't wait to hear a little bit more from you, Tom, who you're wearing a shirt of coming to the table, which is sort of a process, I think, maybe a way to describe it, of how to have these kind of conversations, many of which may be foisted upon us during the holidays that are coming up sooner than later. So we'll hear a little bit more about that with author Tom DeWolf, as well as the director of the Healing Racism Institute, Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery. They'll be in conversation at the UMass Center in Springfield. This evening at 6:30, and we'll have more conversation with them coming up in just a minute.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are having a conversation with Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery, which I've been saying wrong this whole time, but I appreciate being corrected on it, who is the director of the Healing Racism Institute, and Tom DeWolf, who's part of the largest slave-owning family in the history of the United States.
A descendant of,
yes, and is wrestling with that now. But part of that conversation that we had off the air about correcting somebody's name happens to Khalees all the time. I see it all the time. These are the kind of calling out/calling in conversations that I think we too often don't have. I'm sure, Tom, that it has been hard for you in this family to have these conversations. Is your family totally on board with what you're doing? Have they come to terms with having open and honest conversations about your family's legacy around your holiday tables?
Like every family, of course not. I mean, everybody comes to every difficult topic with their own set of history, their own traumas that they've experienced, their own inputs from varieties of places that tell them this is what you ought to believe. And so often we get into these places where this is what I do. I mean, my dad voted Republican his entire life, and towards the end of his life, I said, Dad, you're on Medicare, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, Social Security. You're using medical cannabis to help with the pain from your cancer treatments, and all your health insurance is paid for because of the job that you had. You're not a Republican, you're a socialist. And he laughed and he said, yeah, but I'm still voting for Romney. Mm-hmm. And we get into these habits, these patterns, and I guess what we're trying to encourage is for people to be willing to break away from those habits, because it's like we've been told by the poets and the authors for generations, the only way out is through. We can't avoid this. We can't walk away from it. And if we do, we're just going to pass this on to the next generations.
Is that at the core of the coming to the table approach to looking at this legacy of slavery and trying to figure out how we deal with it now?
Yes, the coming to the table got started by the black and white descendants of Thomas Jefferson and the black and white descendants of the Hairston family, which was I'm from the largest slave trading dynasty. The Hairstons were the largest plantation owning, people owning family, and the Hairstons and the Jeffersons, the Marthas and the Sallys, got together and created this coming to the table approach, which involves looking honestly and openly at history, which it involves looking at healing by any means necessary, building authentic and accountable relationships both within and across racial lines, and then taking action to undo the systems that continue to oppress all of us, even though I may not feel oppressed. And then using various tools, understanding what trauma is, how it impacts us, how we act out as a result of our trauma, and how to break free from that trauma. And then using restorative justice principles, not just who did something bad and what do they deserve, but who all has been harmed by this and what can we do to heal to the degree possible from all of this. So it's a whole thing that has been developed, and it involves reparations. It involves mindfulness practices. It involves, so much linked to descendants, black and white. I have a cousin in Springfield named John Woods who's lived here all his life, and we're both connected to these people from Bristol, Rhode Island. And so John has done an amazing amount of genealogical study to be able to understand this, and we've developed just a warm friendship over the 25 years that we've known each other. So it's a journey, but it is worth it because this is the path to liberation, is the knowledge and the freedom of not being oppressed by it.
Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery from the Healing Racism Institute based here in Western Massachusetts, is there a good first step for people to take with your organization or on their own that they can begin to have these internal conversations and then external conversations?
Absolutely. So I do believe that whatever healing and dismantling racism that we are going to engage in, it first begins with ourselves. I can't look at you and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. I have to deal with my own stuff. And so the first thing to do, from my perspective, is to take a look at ourselves and be willing to acknowledge that there is something that we need to heal. But from the Healing Racism Institute's perspective, the first thing would be to take our 2-day seminar. And yes, it's 2 days of concentrated work on dealing with healing racism. And to know that 2-day, that's just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an eye-opener and we provide tools for you. But I would suggest that they start there.
Well, another great place to start might be this evening at 6:30 at the UMass Amherst Center in Springfield, where there will be a conversation with our guests from today, Healing Racism Institute's Dr. Terrlyn Curry Avery, as well as author Tom DeWolf behind the book Inheriting the Trade. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, our pleasure. On the next Fabulous 413, documentary filmmaker Evan Goodchild on his new work that looks at the life of Belchertown realist painter Gregory Gillespie. Oh my God, words.
We're fresh back from vacation. We're also going to have live music with Antoine Stanley from the band Wolfpack and more. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.